Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third episode of Speak On It from the Chicago Public Library, UMedia. My name is Justin, and I am joined by the incredible author, Francisco X. Stork. Welcome, Francisco. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So, a little bit about Francisco. He was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and then moved to El Paso, Texas when he was 9. And he's written many amazing books, including The Memory of Light, Marcelo in the Real World, Disappeared, and the soon to be released sequel to Disappeared, Illegal, which is available on August 4th. I read it. It is so good. I highly recommend it. He studied English literature and philosophy at Spring Hill College and then later got a graduate degree from Harvard University in Latin American literature. And if that wasn't enough, he then became a lawyer after going to Columbia School of Law. So, Francisco, I'm going to be asking you a few questions here. And for all of you who are watching on YouTube, I encourage you, if you have any questions, please post those in the feed and we'll ask them on your behalf. So, to take us back to the beginning, Francisco, was there a particular moment that you realized you wanted to be a writer?
Well, when I was a boy, even 7 years old, I got this idea that I wanted to be a writer, and I think it was a nice way to get attention from parents and teachers. It's all how unusual, but really, I think the decision to be a writer probably became more of a firm thing when I was in high school, and I started keeping a journal, and I started kind of guiding the things that I was interested in reading, and around the idea of maybe someday being able to write. I knew that it would take a lot of learning and a lot of practice to get there. So that's probably in high school is probably when I started the journey. And then when I went to college, I would kind of gear the courses that I wanted to take towards, is this the kind of course that would teach me how to write? And the same thing when I went to graduate school. It's always kind of going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I lost track a little bit about when after graduate school, when I decided that the kind of writing that Harvard wanted me to do, and the other, to be a teacher, was not the kind of writing that I wanted. And so I had to find a way to make a living. And I went to law school with the great idea that, oh, I could write on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know how time consuming that was going to be, the practice of law, especially in the different kinds, private settings that I was practicing. So it was really only until I was 40 years old that I said, I had to stop thinking that I'm a writer if I don't like do something. And I started getting up in the morning around 4 o'clock in the morning and write for 2 hours, and then I would take the train to work as a lawyer. And eventually, like a year later, I had this draft that I submitted to many places. Of course, got rejections, but I got one editor who sent me back a very nice kind of detailed uh, letter about what the things that she thought was I could improve on. And so I worked on that for the next 5 years, and that's how my first book was published. And I was 45 years old when
Mm-hmm.
when that came out.
Wow. So, did you find that because law has a very specific style of writing, philosophy has its own style of writing, did you find that those influenced your creative writing voice at all?
I um, I think they influence the need for precision and for clarity, which I always find that's important. And when I write fiction, is how do I get this image across in a or this in a clear way. And I think that law and philosophy kind of teach you that a little bit. But really, the kind of thinking that you do when you're writing fiction is just so much different than it is when you're writing a legal document. I think that in fiction it's more about imagining and seeing, as opposed to thinking. You have these images in your mind. You have like a little movie going on inside your head, and the goal is to try to find the right words to convey that movie to others. So uh, it's a little bit using your different kind of different side of your brain, the more intuitive, imaginative side than it is in law. But later in the revision process, you almost have to think like a lawyer anyway and try to arrange things in a way that makes sense and so forth. So yes, I
And
think that they influenced me a little bit.
so was it because you were saying like that they are different? Did you ever find yourself like starting to veer into one when it should have been the other? Or did you have a very clear way of delineating like now I'm in creative writing mode, now I'm in legal mode? Like how did you when you were doing them
Yeah.
simultaneously?
No, I think my life was a little bit, bipolar in many ways, in the way that I had like two lives. I had the lawyer life where I had to be a certain way and think a certain way, and then I had this other side of my life which I considered kind of what I really love doing, and I had to find the time. I had to find the time to do that, but they were really separate. I don't think I think that there probably sometimes in my ability to imagine what the other side wanted in a negotiation, that the writing side came through, and
Mhm.
certainly this other side for getting to the bottom of things, that from the legal side probably made its way to the creative side as well. The idea is to be a whole, right, as opposed to like two separate pieces, and it takes a long time to kind of like to be the kind of writer that utilizes both the intuitive side and the logical side, in a way that creates a work of art.
Mhm. And of course, law also plays a big role in many of your novels. Many of your characters are lawyers or have parents who are lawyers. And many of your novels also take place around Boston, where you live, and they take place near El Paso and in Texas, where you've also been. So I was interested that in Illegal, it takes place in Chicago, which is a little bit different from them. What made you choose Chicago for that?
Yeah, I mean Chicago. Well, I guess the kind of like simple answer was that my daughter and her husband and the little baby were living in Chicago at the time, and I was spending a lot of time going over. Uh, but also when I was growing up in Mexico, Chicago was kind of like a mecca. It was a little bit, if you were wanting to go to the United States, like that was the kind of the place that kind of came to mind. And I suppose because there was already a large Mexican population in Chicago, and it's been there for a long time. The different industries of Chicago attracted the Mexican workers. uh, and so when I decided to find a place where Emiliano would make his way to, Chicago just kind of naturally came to mind. I think that it's a very diverse city. Obviously, it's very accustomed to uh, immigrants, and also has a history for tolerance. It has its problems, no doubt about it. But many of the movements for the protection of the refugee started in Chicago. And I did need a place where there would be a few people that would be friendly to Emiliano, even though he was an undocumented alien.
Right. So would you be able to give us just a little bit of like a little elevator pitch or a trailer for Illegal?
Well, illegal follows disappeared. You don't have to read disappeared to read illegal, but and so forth.
Mhm.
She has a good case for asylum, so she turns herself over seeking asylum, and Emiliano goes off to try to live with his father, who abandoned them years before. Uh, but they carry this phone that con- that may contain information as to human trafficking. A connection between Mexico and the United States that involves the trafficking of young women and the disappearance of young women in Mexico who somehow end up over here. And so these people find out, um, people in the United States, as opposed to like Mexican bad people, American bad people, find out about the phone and go after Emiliano and Sarah. So it's in a way it's a reflect. disappeared was what happens in Mexico, and the corruption there, and illegal is kind of the mirror of disappeared, in that it deals with what happens in the United States, and then the two countries are so connected in many ways, in good ways and in bad ways. The drugs they make are sold over here, the guns that we make are sold over there, and there's this like web of interrelationship between the two countries. And sometimes you realize that you look at Mexico and you see the evil, and you don't sometimes you forget about the evil that exists over here as well. So I wanted to create this kind of complexity of interrelationship of two countries, and the characters that make their way through them.
Hmm.
Well, that was a lot longer than an elevator pitch,
You know
unless it
what?
was like the Empire
Buildings are
State Building.
getting really tall now, so elevators ride for a long time. So Astrid, who's been watching the stream, was wondering, have you had anyone ask you why the title is illegal instead of undocumented?
Yeah, I mean, I undocumented would be the kind of the correct, the correct version, in the sense that it's uh but in terms of it, what Emiliano is in terms of the law, as if is that he breaks the law, because it is against the law to enter the United States without a valid permit. Uh, so he's not only undocumented, but in the eyes of the people uh, who are after him, he is illegal. And also, I mean, the word illegal refers to not only to Emiliano's undocumented status, but uh, to these other people in that are after him, that use the law. What they're doing is perfectly within the words of the law, but it's outside the spirit of the law. So I think that the word kind of plays with this kind of like, okay, what is really legal and illegal here, and just because something is legal, does that make it just? So we're a country of laws, yes, but uh, you know a law doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't isn't always good, right? There were laws for segregation. There were laws that prohibited slaves from being taught how to read. So those laws, we now agree, are not good. And so in many cases, the laws of immigration, I think we can look at them and say, yes, they are laws, and if you violate them, you are illegal. But what is the foundation for these laws? Is there something that makes them just or unjust?
Right, and I can
It's a good
definitely,
question, though.
yeah, and I definitely see the lawyer side of you coming out
Oh God,
there.
no, please.
No, no, in a good way, in a good way. So a lot of your books do talk about very relevant and real and serious topics like illegal and disappeared, talking about immigration and the abduction of people, Memory of Light, which talks about self-harm and suicide and things like that. When you sit down to write a novel, or when the idea comes to you, do you start with, I want to explore a specific topic like suicide or um, immigration, or is it more a theme that gets you?
Well, I think in all cases, the one thing that I find that I haven't that all the books have in common is that the books mean something to me personally. That there are questions that I like to pursue, that affect my life, in some way or another. So there's always like a sense of like, I know that I'm going to be working on this for a year, 2 years, and so there has to be something that kind of keeps me going, as a person. So I think that the theme, in Memory of Light, the depression was something that I dealt with for most of my life, and so I wanted to understand it better. I wanted to like create words to feelings that I had, and so that kind of kept me going. In the case of Disappeared and Illegal, the book started at a time where, of the last presidential election, when there was such negative images of the Mexican immigrant. They were being really portrayed as caricatures of uh, and so I felt like I needed to do something with this anger that I felt. I needed to make it creative, and to work through it. and to come up with something that answered those caricatures, in a way, by creating characters that were deep and complex, not necessarily good, I mean, but not necessarily all good, I would say, but just real people, as opposed to just these images that we have of the immigrant. So I think in all cases it's something that what I write about are things that touch me, and then I try to create those topics to be interesting for others as well.
Hmm. And you mentioned when you were saying that it takes you sometimes a year or 2 years to write these novels. That's a long time to live with these characters and
Right.
these worlds. I feel like sometimes, and I know for me, especially when I was a teen, I would read a book that I loved and I'd be like, oh, of course, like that's the way it had to be written. And I bet they pumped that out in probably a week. Like, how do you, spending a year or 2 years on a novel, how do you handle things like writer's block, or how do you handle things where you're like, this idea is just not working? How do you navigate all of those pitfalls that sometimes
Well,
pop up?
I mean, it takes me a long time. For a long time, I was writing while I was a lawyer, so I would only be able to do it early mornings or weekends and so forth. So that's part of it. Of uh, but a lot of the times, I just tell myself that this is something that is going to take a while. It's not something that I'm going to be able to do in a week or 2 weeks. And you get used to the idea of just doing a little bit every day. I tell myself I'm going to sit down and at my computer for 2 hours, and whatever happens in those 2 hours, I'm going to be grateful for it. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's a few paragraphs. Sometimes, I even get 5 pages or something. So, and sometimes after 2 hours, I'm still going. But it's really just sort of like telling yourself that you're committing yourself to this process for at least 2 hours every day. And just if you do that in a year, you're going to have a book. And there will be times when I just sit there and I'm stuck. It doesn't nothing is coming out, and so you have to kind of have patience, and we'll try again tomorrow. But I stay there for the 2 hours, uh, and then give it time. I have faith that it will happen. A lot of the times I really don't know what's going to happen in the book, so I have a chapter in mind, and sure enough, in that chapter I get the next chapter,
Mhm.
and in the next chapter I get the next chapter, and and I so far, um those chapters are given to me, so I'm very grateful for that.
Do you have any writing exercises or things that you use or would recommend to help someone generate material?
Well, no, I think that a lot of times, you know, uh, reading books that are different than what you usually read kind of gives you some great ideas, about it. Just instead of reading the kind of book that you are going to write, you read a book on science, or on psychology, or on philosophy or something, and then your mind kind of opens up a little bit about how you apply what you're reading, in a different way, uh, to what you're writing. And a lot of times it's just a question of like waiting. You really do have to know how to wait, and how to be kind to yourself while you're waiting. Not berate yourself for not having any ideas, but just be kind, and just know that the ideas will come. Um, a lot of time the ideas are not coming because you're worried about what somebody else is going to think, and so you're worried about, is this something is this something that I can get published, or is this something that my friends will like, and what will my girlfriend think of this, or my boyfriend? And those kind of things are kind of like sensors. uh,
Mhm.
so there's a part of you that kind of needs to just kind of uh, isolate yourself a little bit, and just be be bold, and say the heck with it. I'm gonna write my book, and and see what happens, without worrying too much about whether it's going to get published, or whether it's going to be popular or whatever. And just so you dig deep, and this is what I want to say, and then just say it.
And then that's what the editing process is for, when you can be like, oh, these things that I got out, maybe I can tweak or change them
Correct. Yeah.
or whatnot.
Yeah. You go
Oh,
back.
what? I'm sorry.
So years later, after you kind of get this out, you go back and you look at it, and you use that other side of your brain that we talked about,
Right.
to fix things.
So once you've written the book, then how does that editing process work? I assume you edit it a little bit too. Do publishers help you edit? Your
Yeah. No, I work pretty much alone on a first draft without showing it to anybody, not even my wife or any. I'm just I just do a first draft, uh, and then nowadays, because of my situation, I'm older. I mean, I just give it to the editor, as opposed to working with other writing groups, which I think could be helpful for a lot of people, to give it to people that you trust to give you comments. But now I just give it to the editor, and because I work alone without showing it to anybody, sometimes the edits are pretty substantial. Like, I've had books like 40% of the book changes after the editor gets through it. But so the editor becomes kind of the eyes of the reader, especially the eyes of a young person who's going to be reading it. They're able to put themselves in that position and say, this is great, heartfelt stuff, Francisco, and very poetic, but nobody else is going to like it except you. so so I go back and fix things. So I trust my editor. If I don't agree with my editor, I mean, I can sort of give my reasons why, but I usually listen to them. And so, I mean, that's what takes a while, is that once you finish a draft, which, let's say, is 6 months, you still have another 6 months of like going back and forth, and changing things. And I'm trying to think of something in a legal, um, that I changed at a request to the author. I think I started illegal, just like I did disappear in the third person present, you know,
Mhm.
and because I was writing about Sarah, who's in a detention center, I needed to get into her mind, and sort of the editor just said, I'm not really feeling empathetic towards Sarah. I'm not really feeling like some of the things that she's feeling. And so why don't you try writing a first person, see if that. And so I did Sarah, and I was able to, in the first person, I mean, I was able to access a little bit more of what she goes through in that detention center, and kind of the loss of faith that she goes through, in terms of her belief that she's going to get, that the United States is going to do right by her asylum claim. And slowly, she sees that she's another claim in a sea of claims, and another piece of paper in somebody's desk, and so that, to reflect that hopelessness, it just was much better to do that in the first person, than. So that was a change that the editor, I thought, was a good call on their part.
And I guess the role of the reader is what makes creative writing or a novel different from journaling, which is what you said you started out with, where journaling is really just about what the writing means to you personally, and it doesn't need another reader. Do you find it tricky balancing of writing what you want to write, but still making it so that it is for others at the same time?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. I think that I mean, part of the writing process is an art. You have to. There's a piece of it that I call expression, which is like kind of like the journal part, which is you're really kind of dealing with the things that you're interested in. But that expression has to become kind of communication, uh, and that's where kind of like the craftsman, uh, the the craft of writing comes into being, into being able to, um, and then I think for me, it works better to not join those two those two processes simultaneously, but to wait until I finish the expression and then go back and and with the help of an editor try to make it into communication. Because if I'm writing and I'm kind of like keeping an eye on the reader, I could get lost. I could. There are decisions that you have to make in the book that you stop and you can be true to yourself, or you can kind of keep an eye and say, well, this is going to be more interesting. This is going to sell me more books. If I have these two people fall in love,
Uh-huh.
maybe I should do that. And so, but that's not that's not really true to the story. So I have to be careful when I'm writing to obviously there's a little bit of me out there that kind of keeps an eye out for the reader. But I would say that at least on the first draft, I try to be uh, I try to stick to myself as much as possible, and then come back and turn it into something that I hope is interesting for people.
Hmm. Well, speaking of things that are interesting for people, Ray, who is watching, was wondering, what are some of your favorite books right now, or ones that have been interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I like uh, those young adult books that are kind of poetic in a way, and kind of deep. I like the Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I mean, I just admire how he wrote about this very serious topic, uh, in a way that was light, and he also had humor, and also and also just, I mean, the fact that he was able to um, create characters, even characters that are bad. You kind of saw their humanity in it, and so I like those books. I read a lot in Spanish still because I think it helps me with my rhythms. A lot- Emiliano. I mean, when I write about something that Emiliano did, for example, who's supposed to just uh, speak more Spanish than English. How does he say it in Spanish? I say what he wants to say in Spanish first, and then write it in English. So there's some great Latin American writers out there that I still keep rereading, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and who wrote The 100 Years of Solitude. It has just incredible like music to his words, and so the Spanish is still very helpful to me.
Mhm. Well, we are running low on time now. I was wondering if there was anything that you wanted to say to the teens watching that we didn't cover, or if you have any words of advice for aspiring young writers.
Well, first of all, thank you, Chicago Public Library, for this opportunity to speak to you, and thank you, Justin. Great questions. And so I guess in terms of advice to young writers, I think that the best advice that I can give you is to think of writing as a lifetime activity, as opposed to one book that to be published. Think of something that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Uh, that you're going to be learning about it, that you're going to be practicing and training, just like you would at any sport. Just do it over and over and over again, and do it and for the enjoyment that it provides, but also to realize that it's going to be difficult at times. Uh, but do it because it makes you who you are. And even if you're never published, you're still a better person for doing it. So
Mhm.
that's my advice.
Yeah, that
Very much.
that's beautiful advice. Well, Francisco, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you who were tuning in. We will be back at the same time next week, Wednesday at 4 p.m., where we will be chatting with Laura Ruby, an author who wrote Bone Gap and 13 Doorways, Wolves Behind Them All. So have a great day, everyone. And once again, thank you so much, Francisco.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.